Welcome back. Today we're excited to hear about David a little bit. If you've been following us for a little bit, you know that we're all about hearing stories, hearing about folks, and getting to know them and what makes them tick and things of that nature. And so today we are very, very fortunate to have David with us and get to hear a story a little bit. So, yeah, David, as we've kind of started off all of these podcasts, as we've gotten to know folks, we'll ask a similar question. Help us to get to know you a little bit. Who are you? What's unique about you? Why are you who you are? Obviously, there's some interesting things in terms of your family and things of that nature. So yeah, help us to get to know you a little bit.
Where do I begin? I realized, so I spoke at a church and gave two talks this past Saturday, and the first talk was like 45 minutes on my faith journey, my personal journey, and I realized, now that I've lived like 5 decades, there's a lot of different chapters to the story. But what I begin with oftentimes is a photo, since a pictures of 1,000 words, and it's a picture of my parents in 1972, soon after I was born, and they're kind of wearing the clothes from that time period, and those kind of thicker, brimmed glasses my dad was wearing, which are now back in vogue. And my mom was like wearing a tennis outfit because I think she was playing tennis, and you see the back of my head in a baby carriage. But I think that year, 1972, is important because not only was that the year that I was born, but it says that I'm a post 1965 baby. And 65, I have learned the last several years as I've been studying Asian American history and interweaving my family story within this larger history of Asians in the US, that, something happened in 1965. I was doing an oral history interview of my father, and I wanted to know more of his background story. And I learned that in 1966, a US military cargo plane was resupplying US troops in Vietnam, because the US was fighting in Vietnam. And after supplying those troops, this empty cargo plane stopped in Taipei, Taiwan, and picked up 200 Taiwanese graduate students headed for the US. And my dad was on that military cargo plane, where he ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, studying chemistry at Georgia Tech, where I was born. So that was a fascinating image, connecting the US war in Vietnam with post 1965 immigration, with a skilled laborer, highly educated laborer in my father, who was a chemist. And so you really can't understand my early childhood without understanding the role of chemistry in my family, because my dad was a chemist. I'll share like one story. I'll share one story here because I vividly remember it. But there's any number of chemistry experiments going on in my family at any time. I remember my family, we like salted eggs. So we had like a huge thing of water that I saw my mom putting salt in it, and it was salted eggs. And we would eat that with our shifan or kanji. And my dad tried to explain how salt and water makes salted eggs. I also remember him making wine in the basement. Like, he would get grape juice and like yeast, and then he put it in a dark container and it would ferment, which is, I believe, an anaerobic chemical reaction with the yeast and the sugar, the fructose or glucose. And he explained it all to me, that he was making wine, but the way he would explain it was always in terms of chemistry. And here's the one story I thought was really funny. So my mom, as most women do, uses lotion on her hands. She's washing dishes, the hands get chapped, so she uses lotion. So one day she ran out of hand lotion. And so she's like, telling my dad, hey, can you get some hand lotion? And kind of being the thrifty person he was, he didn't want to like spend unnecessarily. So he always reads the ingredients list of everything, and then kind of always says something to the effect, "Oh, I could make this better than what the corporations do." But he saw like on the back of the hand lotion, glycerol, active ingredient, I don't know, 4%. I'm making that up. So he goes, "Oh, glycerol. I have that at the lab, and my percentage is higher than 4%, so it must be better." Okay, so he brings home glycerol from the lab in one of those brown bottles, and it is significantly higher percentage than what you get off the shelf. All right. So then he goes, "Oh, try this, David. Just dab a little of this glycerol and put it on your hand and see how it absorbs into your skin." And I put it on my skin and I start rubbing it in, and there's like this tingling sensation. Oh, I don't know if it's burning, but I was like, "What's going on?" He goes, "Oh, this is like 10% glycerol. It's really strong." I'm like, "Yeah, no fooling, because it doesn't feel anything like hand lotion." So I think it got absorbed much more significantly than normal hand lotion. But there's any number of stories of my dad explaining reality constantly in terms of chemistry. So he was a true chemist. He saw the world through the eyes of chemistry, which meant that he emphasized scientific education a lot in the family, which also meant, I was a biochem. So in college, my major was molecular biochemistry and biophysics. I must have been the worst biochem student. Like I was. So there was a BS track versus a BA track. I chose the BA track, which is like, that's not the hardcore way of studying. But if you were truly committed to biochem, you were BS, not BA. Because I did a lot of East Asian studies stuff in addition to the biochemistry stuff. But eventually, I mean, this is the shorter version, and you can pick up any thread here. The shorter version here is, I went to seminary instead of further graduate school in the sciences. And I remember taking like biblical studies and theology and church history. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I am not a science person. I am a humanities person." And I realized this piece of self-understanding dawned upon me when I was like 21 years old. So it took me a long time to figure out I am not a natural science person. I'm a theological science person. And seminary was like being a fish in water. I was like, "Oh, I love this. I love studying the humanities. It's a much better fit for me than the sciences." My brother was also a biochem major. He did go to medical school, and I can see how for him science, medicine was a much better fit. So it took me a long time to figure out my own path. Like I wasn't a chemist type person like my dad. It took a lot of trial and error to find my true passions within theology, but eventually I got there.
Mm. David, wow, so you're a second gen,
Yes.
a child of immigrants.
Yes.
I'm curious, in the context of growing up in Georgia and all the different places, like what were your parents Christians from Taiwan? What was your church experience growing up in the various areas?
Oh,
Can
that's
I
great.
add? Can I add something to
Yeah.
that? Because your dad is a chemist, and so again, you'll tell us about your faith history and these are in terms of your family. But how does a person who emphasizes a scientific understanding and education, right? And like for you, so for you to go from biochem to theology, to me seems like that wouldn't have been the smoothest transition as it pertains to what your father would have wanted you to do as a hardcore lifelong chemist. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of add that in there.
All right. My memory is very bad. So I'm going to follow up with Unji's question first and hopefully get to Pete's question. So I remember my mom saying she went to a Christian, perhaps all girls high school in Taiwan. So my mom had some Christian formation, at least formally, in Taiwan. My dad did not. So I remember his first job after getting his PhD from Georgia Tech in chemistry was in Buffalo. And we attended I think there was like maybe one Chinese church in the Buffalo metro area, the Buffalo Chinese Christian Church. So we attended that church. And I remember, I remember seeing I don't remember him getting baptized, but we have a photo of my dad getting baptized. So my dad became a Christian in the U.S. at the Buffalo Chinese Christian Church. And I have a lot of memories. That's where I became a Christian. Said the sinner's prayer in 4th grade with the Sunday school teacher. I also remember just running around a lot. Like, I think, yeah, I would like run under the pews, around the pews. Buffalo has snow, so we were inside a lot in the wintertime. And there was these like foyer with steps. And I think all the kids try to figure out who could jump from the highest number of steps onto the ground. So that was like a little competition. There's food at church as well. But I also remember, because the service was in Mandarin, and my Mandarin is not so good. So wherever there were English language stuff, because this is a white church that we rented out, in the lobby, there would be all these tracts, like illustrated Christian tracts, and they were like cartoons. They were with pictures and captions. So I think my primary religious education was by reading English tracts through these cartoon books at the church that we were at. And then his job moved us to Louisville, Kentucky, where we became members of the Louisville Chinese Christian Church. And that's where I eventually got baptized after my freshman year in college, was at the Louisville Chinese Christian Church. And, you know, some of the memories then were, again, the service is in Mandarin. My Mandarin's not so good. So some of the kids, and we didn't have a big youth group. Like, I don't know, maybe 7 kids from like 5th grade to 11th grade, right? So, and we would sit in the back, and we'd have headphones because, you know, one of the parents or someone would be translating the Mandarin service into English, and we would have our headphones on. And on Friday night, we would have youth group, which basically consisted of watching Knight Rider come on at 8:00. I remember we'd bring a TV, it'd be Knight Rider, or I think the other one is like Airwolf. that was playing around 8:00 on Friday nights in the 80s. All right. So I think Anju might recognize some of these TV shows. But we got to know it's like church was like an extended family. So the kids, you knew their parents, we'd go over to each other's houses. So church life and social life and family life were all sort of interconnected. I'm trying to think here. Yeah, does that answer your question, Anju? Pretty much.
Thank you. And I guess this question of that transition from science to
Yeah. So Pete, you were asking about science and theology. Is that the question, or?
Yeah, well, because again, maybe I'm being Korean here, but if your dad is a chemist, and understandably he's a Christian, but like my dad, he disowned me when I decided to become a pastor, and grew up in church all his life and things of that nature. So for you to go from someone who was studying biochem on the BA track, which I didn't even know you could do, but anyways, the BA track studying biochem, and then deciding to go to seminary afterwards, and so what was that transition like, and kind of how did that call happen? Because we'll get to it a little later, but you're the director of the Center of Asian American Christianity, which is a really amazing thing. And so how does that transition happen?
Okay.
So
you're asking about my vocational journey. Gotcha. So let me back into the vocational journey by sharing this kind of my pivot from biochem to like theology. And there's a couple of things here. One is just controversies in ministry. So in the 90s, there were like student revivals going on campus. And I just remember I had a lot of questions about the work of the Holy Spirit. Like, who is the Holy Spirit? What does the Holy Spirit do? There's all these kind of revival, sort of charismatic type things going on at different campuses. My campus also got caught up in some of these revival things. And I just had basic biblical interpretation and theological questions surrounding the person and work of the Holy Spirit. And so when the opportunity to study in seminary came up, it was like, oh yeah, I got some questions here. But also at a practical level, I just remember attending, maybe for the first time, a Presbyterian church, and was exposed to liturgy. And we read the Apostles' Creed. And I was like, when I read it for the first time, I was like, dang, someone actually summarized the entire Bible in like a paragraph? This is amazing. My heart sang, because it was a beautiful encapsulation of the Christian tradition and Scripture's revelation. And I was like, this is so beautiful. I never knew it existed. And that kind of helped me fall in love with the Presbyterian tradition, was through something like reciting the Apostles' Creed. And then I learned there's like a slightly longer one called the Nicene Creed. And it was just such a clear exposition of the Christian faith. So that kind of told me there's this whole thing out there called theology, right? And I remember going to seminary in Vancouver at Regent College. It was just to be a 1-year kind of personal education holiday excursion before I went back to medical school. I had fulfilled my pre-med requirements, took the MCATs, did not apply to med school, but took a year hiatus to study some theology because Regent had a 1-year diploma program. So I took a year off because I had a lot of friends at Yale Med. So I was a Yale undergraduate. I was thinking about Yale Medical School. And I had one friend, her dad was a doctor, her mom was a doctor, her brother was a doctor. So she thought she would want to be a doctor. And I just remember her telling me something along the lines of, I'd rather go to cosmetology school and work on hair and nails, because that's what I really love doing. But I'm like 2 years in financially and otherwise in med school. It doesn't make sense anymore to back out. But she was thinking of it. I was like, oh my gosh, you're a Yale Med student and you're thinking of like leaving medical school. Why? Because it didn't align with some of her core passions and interests. I think she eventually chose plastic surgery or something like that. I had another friend who was a resident, and I think he was burned out. He's really burned out, and he took time off from his residency. And I think I heard him, like, he was taking time off to do something in Alaska in the wilderness. I was like, oh my gosh, here's another person who I really look up to. And then there's another med student who basically said something to the effect, David, if you're going to med school, it is a long-term commitment. It's 4 years of med school. It's years of residency afterwards. You really want to make sure this is your choice, that you own it. And the picture I got was like, medicine's like marriage. It's a long-term commitment. And here I had all these examples of people showing me lack of commitment. So I got really antsy. I was like, oh, I don't know if this is the right thing, because I wasn't sure if I was doing it to please my parents or if I was really committed to medicine. And for me as a Christian, part of me was justifying medicine so I could pursue missions, because I wanted to like integrate my Christian vocation with my professional vocation. So I had always thought about medical missions as one way to integrate the two. But really, I was like, I don't know if it's really my pursuing God's call. Maybe I'm just a chicken and wanted to please my parents and end up with something that gave me financial security at the time, right? So I decided, well, all right, if I'm not really sure, I need to take a break. So I went to seminary. get a diploma, or at least a diploma, to study Christian theology. And that's when I found my fit with theology. I felt like a fish in water. It was a much better fit than biochem and medicine. So the 1 year became multiple years. I was doing part-time ministry at a Chinese church in Vancouver, studying theology at the same time. And that's when I decided I'm not going to go to medical school. I'm going to get an MDiv. And then, to Pete's question, I had to break the news to my parents. So there was a lot going on in my family at the time. Probably won't get into all of it. But I think the short version of the story is this did not make my parents happy. They had envisioned a certain life path for me that made sense to them as first generation immigrants seeking to give a life for my brother and me that was better than their life. Like, that's their calculus is, we've made certain sacrifices coming to the US, investing in your education, and we want to see you set up in a way from their perspective that made sense to them. And that involved something like becoming a doctor. That was something very tangible that they could latch onto that made sense. They did not understand what this theology thing was. They did not understand what seminary was. They did not understand what an MDiv was. And the idea, like, yes, they went to church, so they knew what a pastor was, but that was not their idea of a successful trajectory for me. Sorry, pastors out there. All right. So there were tough conversations. At the end of the day, though, they could tell this was something I chose. This was something I loved. And because they loved me, ultimately their ideas for me changed. They gradually accepted the path that I had chosen for myself, even with all of its uncertainties. Now, there's some, so here's some of the qualifications and nuance. I was getting a graduate degree, right? So it was still a master's. So it's kind of like in my dad's calculus, okay, I think that's a good thing. At least he's getting more education. So that was a plus. It was just in the wrong field, but at least it was further studies. He didn't understand like how I was going to feed and clothe myself. That wasn't clear to him yet. But here, I'll share one kind of thing, which may have been preparatory. So my parents basically forced me to play violin until I was 16.
Ooh.
I have my violin sitting, in my basement somewhere, and I hated it. Like, I would make every excuse possible to not go to violin lesson. I would have a physical stomach ache. I would resist and fight it to the max. And finally, when I hit age 16, they let me quit. And so I think that may have shown them forcing something on me may not be the most productive thing. They forced violin on me and I fought it all the way. So maybe they realized some things are not worth the fight. And I could see myself the medical path may not have been the best path for me.
Just as a follow-up, now your parents are over the moon?
I don't know about that. I think Yeah, so now it's like, David, where's your book? Like,
Mhm.
you so you got to get that dissertation published. And so my dad, my dad did get a PhD, so he was helpful with things like, the dissertation, managing the relationship with the supervisor, and he had some experience with that, right? Where my mom, I think she's a little bit more relaxed about all of that professional stuff, and she checks in with me about parenting. Being a spouse, being a parent.
Mm.
Those are more of her interests. So I would say, yeah, we have a 15-year-old son. So I think when they became grandparents 15 years ago, almost 16 now, then a lot of their concerns kind of changed. And I think they also realized my wife is a much stronger financial provider than me.
Yeah.
So, and I think both my parents see that. So, there's kind of a sigh of relief there.
So you mentioned your wife. For the listeners, David is married to a Korean woman.
Yeah.
And so that's a part of the thing. And I think it's a great transition to where we want to get to, which is your role and your passion and your professional career as the director of Asian American Christianity. So I have to give a little bit of, I guess, background, at least with this question. Asian American Christianity is a thing, but it isn't a thing all at the same time, in my perspective. It exists clearly, but it's not a known thing in the wider world of Christian theology, right? Obviously, it exists because there are Asian American Christians, so there ought to be an Asian American Christianity. Now, what I find interesting is that Unju and I were Korean, and so at least for me, a lot of my background is in Korean American Christianity, very nuanced within the Korean American Church, which is different as we've highlighted. And so, you being married to a Korean woman, and then that all bit, and then going from there, and then basically being a director of Asian American Christianity, and getting, I don't know if it was, I don't know if you stepped into that role, if it was already there, but kind of, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because to me, the more I get to know you and the more I get to learn about kind of what makes Asian American Christianity distinctive from maybe others, it's a very fascinating thing because again, growing up, we didn't even know that that was a thing. It just kind of was like, oh, I grew up in the Korean American church, or you grew up in the Chinese American church, and that was about it. But there wasn't a topic of conversation, let alone a topic of theological study that encapsulated our Asian American identity. And As a little bit of background, I remember when I was first talking and getting to know you for your own oral history project, you asked me, do you identify as like Asian American Christian or like Korean American Christian, or do you have like any thoughts about either? And I remember thinking about that for the very first time. The answers were very apparent to me, but I had never thought of it in those terms. And so, give us a little bit of background on how you got here and the kind of the work that you're doing, because I think it's fascinating and I think
I want
important.
to lean into the how I got here piece because that's clearer to articulate. I love your question about what is this Asian American Christianity thing, because that's a more nuanced narrative. And I feel like that it could almost be a sub conversation throughout some of our future podcast talks. A shout out to Daniel Lee at Fuller. There's this book published in 1976 that Daniel Lee with Roy Sano have republished in 2023. And it's called The Theologies of Asian Americans and Pacific Peoples, a reader. So this is a kind of an early compendium of Asian American theology from 1976. It's for free if you download the PDF from Claremont Press, and it's co-published with the Fuller Asian American Center. But, Daniel and I are talking about hosting an event on this book because Asian Americans who are Christian don't know their own history and don't know their own sort of Asian American Christian identity. And there are many, 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 many reasons for this. So I feel like that's kind of a sub conversation, and we can begin to take a look at it. But to answer how I got here, I don't know. Of course, I think Anju will remember this. In 2017, Anju, do you remember doing something by per my invitation?
Yes, it was a convening conference of Asian American folks, whether it be theology or ministries. And so it's exciting to be a part of that.
Because Anju is one of our illustrious PTS alum, and she's a Reverend Doctor, as Pete mentioned, she was the perfect speaker, someone with extensive formal academic theological training, but also with extensive ministry experience. And so Anju gave a talk with, along with two other pastors and three other scholars. And Isaac Kim was a doctoral student and colleague of mine. I was a doctoral student at the time. And that was the first sort of Asian American theology and ministry conference that I organized. And it was a blast. It was kind of an experiment. Princeton Seminary had an Asian American program that was established by Professor Emeritus Sang-Hyun Lee, who has recently passed. May he rest in peace. His funeral was very recent, and it gives occasion to reflect upon his leadership and investment within the Asian American community at Princeton Seminary and beyond. And so I believe there was a significant grant from the Henry Luce Foundation in the late 1980s, which Professor Sang-Hyun Lee had applied for to help fund the Asian American program. And I believe Pastor Ron Chu was one of the first associate directors. And Anju knows this because she was a student along with with David Choi, Pastor David Choi, who was also a speaker in 2017, and a whole range, multiple generations of students of Asian descent studying at PTS in the 90s had some kind of connection to the Asian American program, which Sang-Hyun Lee, Dr. Sang-Hyun Lee, was the first director. So fast forward a bit, and there's a lot of very, very significant history in the interim. But to kind of cut to the chase of Pete's question, President Craig Barnes, at the request of the Asian Association of PTS, the student group that I was part of when I was a THM and a PhD student, they approached President Barnes and asked if I could be a full-time director of the Asian American program while reorienting it towards a more academic kind of focus, given my skills and background and interest in Asian American theology. And so President Barnes had hired me out of my postdoctoral fellowship in Asian American theology to direct the Asian American program, which we later recast as a public-facing research center and renamed as the Center for Asian American Christianity. So those are the kind of administrative steps. I would say a really significant stage of my formation was in 2015. I attended the Asian Theological Summer Institute, which is a week-long kind of a workshop featuring senior Asian theological scholars and leaders. Shouts out to folks like Kwak Pui Lan, Peter Fan, Benny Liu, Paul Rajashakar, and Joe, and many, many, many others who spent their week kind of with us, mentoring us, guiding us, and we would workshop our dissertation proposals in a really intellectually stimulating, but also socially engaging context. And it was really my first exposure in the world of theology to the kind of Asian and Asian American context, where I didn't have to hide my Asian identity, but could kind of rigorously engage it as part of my own theological education. And so maybe, and I'll share kind of like one recent thought. The opening sentence of Calvin's Institutes defines wisdom as knowledge of God and knowledge of self. And I learned this when I studied Calvin back at Regent. And one of my professors called this double knowledge of God, knowledge of self. More recently, as a Reformed Asian American Christian, I think of this double knowledge in terms of this knowledge of self is not an individual knowledge of just David Chao. But you can't understand David Chao unless you understand my mom and my dad and their immigration story. They were born in China and in 49 left China for Taiwan. And in 66, left Taiwan for the US. And so that migration story and the kind of related ethnic and racialization process shapes who I am. And once you begin talking about 65 Immigration Act and 1882 exclusion and the US war in Vietnam and all these kind of global politics, you've entered the world of the social history of Asians in the US. And so for me, the knowledge of self is this expanded social knowledge or social history of Asians in the US. So that's how I understand Asian American theology. Asian American theology to me is this three strands, these three narrative strands of our intergenerational family history, along with the social history of Asians in the US that looks especially at migration and racialization, as it's all taken up into God's salvation story. That's my way of kind of describing what Asian American theology is. And it's important because most theological curricula in the US features the narratives and migration of European Christians, whether they're Anglican or Reformed or Lutheran or Catholic, which is great because that's an important part of the history of the church theologically and otherwise. But in the last couple of years, I've just been doing more reading and realized, the church is more than just Anglo-European. It is global. And there's this massive conversation going on about world Christianity. For example, I was just looking at my bookshelf, and one of the books that my colleague Easton Law at the Overseas Studies Ministry Center recommended to me is called Migration and the Making of Global Christianity by Jehu Hansilas. I'm probably butchering his name, my apologies, who's a scholar at Candler in Atlanta. And so for me, I view Asian American Christianity as a subset within the broader world Christianity conversation because of the Missio Dei, the sending of God's Son across space and time, where people become Christian in different locations and different times. And to understand that movement of people, which is migration, as kind of internal to what we understand Christianity to be as a global religion. So that's part of my academic and sort of research orientation, is to make the study of Asian American Christianity a discipline in its own right. There are 22 million Asians in the US. Pew says 42% of them identify as Christian. They're roughly half are Catholic and half are Protestant. But if you looked at our theological curriculum in the North American seminaries, you would never know that statistic because we study Christianity as primarily an Anglo-European thing. What the global Christianity conversation does is, wow, no, the Anglo-European Christendom project is kind of becoming a minority report. It's studying what God is doing in the majority world, in Asia, Africa, Latin America. That is offering some of the more dynamic, kind of the more intellectually stimulating conversations. So I often share how there are 13 million Presbyterians in South Korea compared to 4 million Presbyterians in the US. Just chew on that fact for a moment. the Presbyterianism or the Reformed tradition is, even though it was birthed in Switzerland, it cannot be considered simply a European thing. It has significant global ramifications. And I learned just this morning in my oral history interview with a senior seminary professor and church leader in Taiwan that there are 1,300 ordained leaders in the Presbyterian Church of Taiwan. 600 of them are women. So you can go to print on this. 1,300 ordained people in the PCT, the Presbyterian Church of Taiwan. 600 of them are women. The PCT started ordaining women in the 1950s. And this person said before the PCUSA did. So Pete, I see your question. Go for
it. I got a follow up. So the Presbyterian Church obviously has long roots in Korea.
Yes.
Do you know any of those similar types of statistics about the Presbyterian Church of Korea and its ordination of women and those types of things? Because again, we began part of the conversation, 13 million Presbyterians, right? 4 million here in the States. That's a staggering number if you just think about it. And we've always known about Korean megachurches. And then you talk about the Taiwanese Presbyterian Church. Does it feel that would be a similar thing that is happening in Korea? Which to me is a fascinating thing because this is Asian American Christianity from a global perspective, two different Asian countries and their understanding of Presbyterianism, if you want to even go, obviously within the broader Christianity. So yeah, I was staggering.
So I think the data points regarding women's ordination with the Presbyterian Church of Korea are going to be different. And I think there are going to be different contextual reasons for that. But because we are dealing with two different species of Asian Presbyterianism, the conversation, the comparative discourse is fascinating. And to my knowledge, and again, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about the sort of indigenous leadership and theological conversations, both within Korea and within Taiwan. I don't know how much cross-fertilization exists, but I would love to facilitate it.
Is in Asia.
Yes.
I think, Peter, getting back to you, no way in Korea do the numbers compare to the numbers that David just shared.
I mean, but it's just staggering. It's staggering.
Yeah, and again, for further conversation in some other time and space, I just wonder if that's also the women's presence. Is that deliberate, or is it lack of men going into ministry? Is it a preference? I don't know. That sounds really a lot of food for thought and to chew on. But going back to the CAAC, I just want to commend you, David, for doing a fantastic job. When you talked about wisdom, knowing God, knowing self, you're actually helping a lot of Asian American Christians become more wise that way, right? Learning more about ourselves and our histories and what we could contribute. And so I think there's this aspect that you are trying to kind of encompass, talking about the Christianities that are global, right? So it's more expansive. But also, I think what this podcast, which I'm very excited, is you're also looking at church history domestically. And you can't have church history, particularly PCUSA history, without the contributions of the Asian American churches. But yeah, just to further ask about your center, things to look forward to in the future, what you hope to accomplish and get to on your bucket list of what you hope for the church overall, but Asian American churches.
Oh, thank you, Anju, for your kind words. I also just want to acknowledge that the work of the center, both academically and ministry-wise, sits on the shoulders of previous generations with Princeton Seminary students and alums such as yourself, Anju, and we mentioned Professor Sang-Hyun Lee and previous directors of the Asian American program. And there's so many Asian American theological scholars out there writing in the field of Asian American theology. And this is all one large conversation and community that I am indebted to and want to be an active partner and stakeholder in. I think one of the overarching goals of the Center for Asian American Christianity, as you've alluded to, is identity formation. So kind of like knowing who we are, where we come from, because that self-knowledge will sharpen our testimony and our witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Kind of my last comment here is I have these 4 focal areas: race, mental health, discipleship, and leadership development. Asian American is a racial category in the US, and so we need to understand how race works, especially for and against Asian Americans. And so that's why we have a lot of content dealing with Asian American racialization. Many new immigrants or recent immigrants to the US lack an understanding of race in the US. They lack that racial self-consciousness. And so understanding some of the migration and historical as well as legislative structures of racialization is really important for our community more broadly. However, race is not something that exists systemically out there. It also has ramifications for our experience, our feelings, our subjectivity. And I'm thinking about this book that David Ng and Shin-Hee Han wrote called Racial Melancholia, Racial Dissociation. It's a fascinating book by an Asian American Studies prof and a clinician. And they make the argument that racism out there affects our psychic lives in here. And that book was a huge paradigm shift because it helped me to connect our sort of internal existence and experience of our own skin and things going on in the political economic structures out there and how these are related. So, and also just knowing that mental health issues are stigmatized within Asian culture and Asian churches. I myself have seen therapists. I see a therapist now because life is hard. And if we go see a doctor for our physical ailments, you go see a dentist for our tooth ailments, we should be seeing mental health experts for our mental health ailments. And so my center seeks to destigmatize and normalize mental health resources through its mental health conference. And I also want to offer resources for Christian discipleship. Discipleship for me is largely about vocational formation, following Jesus, and to offer contextualized resources to help us follow Jesus better. I remember talking to one of my speakers, Carrie Myers, who's a vineyard pastor. And after I spoke at this vineyard gathering, she asked me, David, do you know of any kind of Asian specific spiritual formation resources? And this is a couple summers ago. And I said, no, we need people like you to help us develop them. And so I'm working with a colleague of Carrie's named Sharon Wada, who is the executive director of Sustainable Faith, to develop more contextually specific resources in spiritual formation, especially for the Asian American community. And because pastors are a significant part of my audience, I want to also offer resources for leadership development, the professional development of pastors, which I hope this podcast can help facilitate. So that's kind of a snapshot of some of what the Center for Asian American Christianity seeks to do. And I really just enjoy having these conversations both with you, Anju, and Pete to kind of expand our conversation about Asian American Christianity.
Um, So I think we've come to the end. Just, I guess my final question is, what has been a joy for you in the ministry that you do at school? Just a couple of words to kind of.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Um, I have some students who come in and they say, "Oh, I want to study serious theology," which is like, I don't know, Bonhoeffer, Bard, or James Cone, and they're not interested in Asian American theology at all. But then, like, somehow they end up in my class on Asian American theology, and then we're reading Asian American history, we're reading ethnographic studies of Asian American churches, and then something happens. The light goes off and they're like participating, they're discussing the text, they're sharing their church experience, their family history. And the sidebar conversation I have outside of classes, um, Dr. Chao, your class is transformative. Like, I never thought that my church experience, my faith journey was relevant to my theological education. And your class shows me how it is. To me, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I see them, to kind of go back, growing in wisdom of the kind Calvin describes. So to me, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Man, that's amazing. I think I can say on my own personal journey, if I had that in seminary, that would have been, I think, transformative in so many ways. I feel like a lot of the pastors that are out there, ministers, theologians, they didn't have that growing up, and so that's something amazing that you're doing. Thank you, David. Obviously, thank you, Unju, for hosting this with me. And until next time, we will see you later.